Tennis, it can be said, is in the DNA of literally all video games. As we already know, the first proper video game was Pong, a simple version of tennis. Alright, table tennis, but you get my point. But anyway, since that day, this exciting sport has graced the circuits of just about every other video games console. However, today we are only interested in one console, the Sega Master System. As you might recall from a previous video, Super Tennis, which is a personal favourite of mine, was once slated back in the day by a popular magazine. And so it got me thinking, alright then, what about the other tennis games? Did any of them do any better? There were a handful of other titles offering tennis action on the Master System, and so in this video we're going to take a look back at them. So pour yourself a fresh glass of barley water, pass the strawberries and cream, and get ready to join me for the Grand Slam of Master System Tennis. Okay, so of course it would be remiss of me not to include Super Tennis, or to give it its Japanese title, Great Tennis, somewhere in this rundown, so maybe let's just start with it. It was published in 1986 by Sega, and it's the first tennis game to arrive on the Master System, and it's by far the simplest of all of them. It's also the slowest, but as you'll see later in the video, this is not necessarily a bad thing. Being one of the earlier examples of a Master System game, the graphics and sound are fairly simple. The Japanese version actually boasts more sound effects than the Western version for some reason. As you can see, there's really nothing to it. Serve the ball and away you go. Your opponent doesn't play particularly aggressively, although of course that just depends on your difficulty setting. It's just good pick up and play stuff really. Serving is a piece of cake. Getting the timing right is no problem at all. In fact, if you just hold the button down, you'll serve automatically anyway. Just be sure you're in the right position. You'll pick that up soon enough. One of the constant frustrations in tennis games is the frequency of faults, double faults and lets while serving, but here in Super Tennis it happens pretty rarely. The opponents are fairly placid, and as far as I could tell the difficulty is pretty much only dictated by their speed. Most of the time they'll return the ball right to you, only very occasionally trying to catch you off guard with a forehand smash. Okay, so there are a few faults with the game. First of all, what you see is literally what you get. You don't get to change the courts and you don't get to change the players. Also, the hit detection on the ball can be way off. And in addition to it being quite difficult to tell how high the ball is, sometimes this can result in more than a few really unfair misses. Two-player mode is offered here only as a cooperative game, so if you're looking for a tournament against your mates, well, this one isn't the game for you. Overall, it's a playable enough game. It's not going to set the world on fire, but it's also not complete turd. Sticking the likeness of a prominent sports personality onto a game to boost appeal was common back in the day, and this is no exception. Andre Agassi Tennis came in 1993 and delivers somewhat less than it promises. You play as the titular tennis hero Agassi and no one else, and in case you were wondering, he's the only real life name to appear. All the other players are completely made up. The controls are, quite frankly, a mess. For some ridiculous reason, Andre can't swing his racket whilst he's running, and diagonal movement across the court can be difficult to achieve. If Agassi had really played like this, I doubt he'd have even made it out of the amateur leagues. It's not impossible to reach the ball in tight spots, but it sure makes you work for it. Most of the time, however, you will lose due to sloppy controls. Success is more down to luck than judgment. It's easy to end up mashing buttons hoping that something works. To top it off, between services you swap ends with your opponent. And while that is a realistic element of the game, it's a pain in the arse here because now you're playing from a different perspective, which is bound to cause you confusion. Luckily, serving is straightforward and almost 100% successful, so you're not beset by constant stoppages. And once you can get a rally going, it's hugely satisfying, even if you lose. At least there's a selection of 4 courts to lose on. Choose from grass, hard, clay or indoor. I guess it was meant to affect the bounce of the ball, but really I just preferred the courts that didn't hurt my eyes. Is it me, or does that grass court look hideously bad? There is a 2-player option offering you cooperative doubles or competitive play. It's a fully featured and varied game, marred only by poor controls. However, it's not overly unfair, just pretty damn difficult, demanding that practice makes perfect. This one might deter the casual player, but will definitely reward the dedicated ones. Tennis Ace arrived in 1989 as a follow-up to 1986's Super Tennis. Although to confuse matters, it was actually titled Super Tennis for the Brazilian market because, you know, why not? It was widely regarded as the best tennis offering for the 8-bit, and yeah, it's easy to see why. First of all, it's very appealing aesthetically. It's bright, colourful and has some nicely drawn graphics. The music is particularly enjoyable too, utilising the FM sound unit that gave the Master System its distinctive sound. An interesting touch is that the play changes perspective during the serve, adding just a little bit of variety to the gameplay. However, serving itself is bloody difficult to get right, and you can easily concede a whole bunch of points very quickly simply by double faulting. A lot. But once you get the rally going, the top-down perspective gives you better control of the action. It's significantly easier than the other games that we've seen so far. The bird's eye view of the court during play might not be for everyone though, but that's fine. That's not to say that it doesn't hold a challenge though. The computer opponents can and will get the better of you if you're too complacent. As for the usual features, 2-player options, check. Selection of courts, check. Lots of players to choose from, double and triple check. There is of course a tournament mode as well. In fact, it's all here, and barring an infuriatingly troublesome serving mechanic, there's lots going for it. I mean, it may not be perfect in every respect, but it is a good all-rounder. As a relatively early entry to the Master System library, Tennis Ace is already streets ahead of its predecessor and demonstrates pretty well what the system could do, from its well-constructed visuals to the superb music, even if the gameplay gets a little frustrating at times. It's certainly the first game so far on this list that I would actually recommend. Oh dear. So here's an example of how not to do tennis games. Wimbledon crashed onto the scene in 1992 and boy is it a stinker. Yes, it's actually worse than Super Tennis. I know, right? It's the licensed official game of the famous World Championship held in London, but in truth it's really just a generic tennis game with the Wimbledon name slapped all over it. None of the players in the game are actually named for any real life tennis professionals. So anyway, how does it play? Well, it's hideous. Once again, serving requires at least a degree level understanding of physics as well as a prodigiously acute sense of timing. If you actually manage to serve the ball, then good luck to you, because this is when the gameplay really starts to stink. Your player moves way too fast, as does the ball. Keeping up with the action is nigh on impossible, and you will lose, again and again. I mean, for God's sake, how are you even supposed to play this? Sure, it probably reflects real life tennis speeds, but I mean, I don't know about any of you, I'm not a bloody tennis pro. You'd need the reactions of a cat on amphetamines to be able to play this. Despite being named Wimbledon, the game offers the usual array of clay, lawn and indoor courts, although I don't recall seeing clay or indoor courts at the real thing. Presumably they're included to give you something different to look at while you get trounced yet again. If the aim of this game was to evoke John McEnroe levels of rage and frustration, then it succeeds admirably. There is a 2-player mode once again, and it sorely needs it, because then at least you'll find someone you can actually play a half-decent game against. That's assuming you can achieve anything with these outrageously slippery controls. Unless you're some sort of a tennis masochist, I really recommend you steer well clear of this one. Hot on the heels of the unmitigated disaster of Wimbledon came the imaginatively titled Wimbledon 2 in 1993. Well, this one's better. It's sort of an apology for the original game, and makes some improvements on its predecessor. The first thing to note is the player control is now much better. Instead of zipping around the court like Billy Whiz, the players move at a much more sedate and manageable pace. Hit detection does seem much improved also. There is a fantastically large roster of players, each with their own stats. The graphics in general have had a bit of a tweak here too. Character sprites are a bit bigger this time, and the player animation here is impressive too. There are a number of different actions that your player can perform, such as diving for the ball or cheekily chipping it from behind the net, but I found the losing player having a tantrum while the winner celebrates particularly amusing. Once again, the customisable courts and games make an appearance here, as well as 2 player options, but obviously once it's introduced in these games it would be a massive oversight to take them out in future editions. Overall, it's an upgrade from its awful predecessor, not least in that you can now actually play it without throwing your controller at the screen. The usual little annoyances are there, of course, such as iffy serves or parallax errors when judging where the position of the ball is. It's the game that the original Wimbledon should have been, and since it doesn't add anything extra to the short-lived Wimbledon franchise, my guess is that it was actually released to replace it. It's clearly not the worst game on this list though, so I would recommend giving it a try, if the need takes you. And so, we come to the end of this look back at tennis on the Sega Master System. And as it turns out, while there were better games out there than Super Tennis, it's almost certainly not the worst of the bunch either. Obviously though, this is based purely on my own opinion, and you may not agree. You might firmly believe that Wimbledon was by far the superior game, and I'll respect your opinion, although I might also recommend that you seek professional help. If you enjoyed this video, then may I invite you to click the like button, and your feedback in the comments is always welcome. Conversely, if you didn't enjoy this video, thanks for watching anyway, but I would be glad to hear your thoughts on why you didn't like it. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you next time on Retro Respawn.
You cannot be serious!